Okay. I don't know. We'll find out in a moment. Today's coffee talk is dedicated in loving memory of Le'uli Nishmat. Today's coffee talk is dedicated in loving memory of and Le'uli Nishmat Matilde Nahmad, Matilde bat Paulisa, alav shalom, and Yosef Nahmad, Yosef ben Matilde, alav shalom, by the Nahmad family. Thank you very much, Marie. If you were joining us in person, fantastic. And if not, I hope you get to watch us later. Only nachat for you and your family, and eliyot to the neshamot. Today's topic is towards understanding suffering and adversity. When I sent that topic to Jessica, she's like, what do you mean? Why is it towards and not just like understanding suffering and adversity? And the truth is that I don't think we can understand suffering. So the way I want you to think of this class is an approach to understanding suffering. It gets us a little bit closer. Can we fully understand it? The answer is no. There's limitations, although I do think that what you're going to do today with me is look at the sources that the rabbis have written about for the last 900 years, more than that, because some of these are Talmudic sources, some 2,000 years of sources of different people dealing with the same topic, which is suffering. If you believe that there's a benevolent God in the universe, and He created the world as an act of kindness, and He's the more loving than you could possibly understand, then how do we understand this concept of suffering? How do we deal with it? How do we grapple with it? What's its function? What's its purpose? It's not fair. I often, I get calls like this from people all the time. Rabbi, I'm going through so much pain. It's so difficult. It's so hard. And it's really, really, what am I supposed to say to them? I have no idea why it's happening. We could help try to understand suffering a little bit, but certainly we can't fully appreciate, understand the depth of why we go through suffering. So what I'm going to do with you is I'm going to share with you several different approaches to understand suffering. And you'll see them, they're subtle in the sources themselves. Again, for me, I'm a very big believer that you need to see the sources for yourself. I could tell you nice stories for an hour and make you feel good about suffering, but I don't want to do that. I would much rather give you like the cold, factual, cerebral truths of how we think about suffering, so that, God forbid, if you have to go through some kind of suffering, that at least you're able to kind of put it in the proper context. Okay, at any point, if anyone has any questions, please feel free to ask. So let's just start right away. Ramchal is Ramosha Chaim Luzzatto you read this, and now he wrote this book, Derech Hashem, when he was 21 years old. He died when he was 39. His wife and 2 children died in a plague when he was in his mid-30s. He was completely poor, broke. He left Europe, went to Israel. The people, the Jewish community of Europe chased him out because they thought he was a Mishachist, which is someone who believed that he was the Messiah because of his young age and his particular Kabbalistic views. He had a very difficult life. He was asked to be buried in Tveria. If you ever go to Tveria, it's definitely worth going to his tomb. He's buried right next to Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Kiva was filleted to death in Tveria by the Romans. They literally took an iron comb and peeled the skin off of him from his toes to his head. Okay, died from hemorrhaging, was bleeding out. We know that his story starts when he was 40 years old, is when he starts learning his Judaism. And the Ramchal believed that he was a Gilgul of Rabbi Akiva. He believed that he was a reincarnation of Rabbi Akiva. And that the first 20, 40 years of this man's life, he wrote the most mystical, most important texts we could possibly imagine that exist today. Certainly some of the most important writings in what we call Hashkafa in Jewish philosophy were written by him at a very young age. And he dies at 40, right before his 40th birthday, which is kind of like closing one book of one person's life, of someone else's life, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of interesting ideas over there. Both of them had challenging lives, but both remarkable people. Rabbi Kiva, certainly, we say without him, we would have lost Torah Shabbal Peh, and the Ramchal, we would not be able to relate to any of it. He created a series of books that were passed down the generations that have helped modern people think about their Judaism in a meaningful kind of way. So listen to what he writes. One second, I just got to take a sip. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol nihiyah b'dvaro. Oh my gosh, thank you Hashem for tea. Okay. Ramchal, this is in Derech Hashem, page 31. Every Jew must know and believe that there exists a fixed being, without beginning or end, who brought all things into existence and continues to sustain them. This being is God. Can't have a conversation about suffering without belief in God. If you do not believe in God, then it's much more painful to deal with your suffering because there's no purpose, there's no point to it. If there's no God, then suffering is pointless, right? Why should I suffer? Why should I go through this hardship? But again, if there is a God, then there's purpose and there's meaning. This is a much deeper, broader conversation to have. But if you want to understand that, please, I recommend reading a book called The Handbook of Jewish Thought by Aryeh Kaplan. It is the Handbook of Jewish Thought by Aryeh Kaplan. Anyone who wants to start thinking more meaningfully about their Judaism needs to know that book by heart. It is the ultimate textbook guide to understanding Judaism. Okay, you read that and you become more knowledgeable than most rabbis, unfortunately. Okay, so the Ramchal says, number one, first you got to believe there's a God. That's the first part of this. Number two, let's look at Rav Shlomo Wolbe. Rav Shlomo Wolbe died about 16 years ago. He started the Beit Vad Musar. His works and his writings have inspired me tremendously. I love his stuff. He is a master writer when it comes to character development. The Monday night classes that I give here are based on his talks and his ideas. And this is what he says. He said, God knows everything that happens to all of creation every moment in time. Even when a leaf falls from a tree, God fills the entire world like the soul fills the entire body. There's no place where he is absent. God guides the world. He wants the continuity of the world and every individual in it as well. So the Rambam teaches, he runs the world according to the principles of reward and punishment based on the individual's free will decisions. And therefore, reward and punishment is often an expression of where you are at spiritually. Your spiritual level will determine what you can handle in life. Some people go through much more hardship in life because they're greater people. Some people don't go through much hardship in life because they can't handle that kind of suffering. But just know one thing, if there's a God, there's something called equality. And therefore, every painful episode of our lives is there simply because you could overcome that challenge. God would not challenge you, would not give you something that you can't overcome. He's intimately involved in every single blade of grass that moves. He's aware of it. He knows it. Okay? So he is involved on some level in the suffering as well. So we'll see what that means because there's some philosophical ramifications for that as well. Maimonides, Hilchot Teshuvah, the ability is given to every individual to decide to act properly and to become righteous, to act improperly and become evil. That is what is written in the Torah and Bereshit. And now man is like one of us, knowing good and evil. Remember that? We did this over the summer. This means that a human being is unique creation, that he personally understands the nature of good and evil and can choose to either good or bad. And there's no one who can prevent him from doing either, which means on some level, God removes himself from the equation to allow you to make the positive choice you're going to make, or God forbid, the negative choice that you're going to make. It's up to you. You have free will. So part number one is recognizing there's a God. He loves you. He's intimately involved in everything that happens. Point number two is that you have free will. And that means you can make poor choices. You love ice cream, that's amazing. You want to have ice cream for breakfast, lunch, and dinner? Don't be surprised if you have health problems later. That's not God, that was your poor choices. You like smoking cigarettes? Amazing, I hope you enjoy. But just know that every time you puff, you're bringing carcinogens into your body. God forbid, you're more likely to get lung cancer. That's not God, that's you. Okay? That's you making your free choices. Now, he's saying that you have a choice. You can choose to make proper choices, to eat right, to sleep right, to take care of yourself, take your vitamins, go exercise, go and meditate, take a nice walk, pamper yourselves a little bit, deal with yourselves emotionally, psychologically, physically, give yourselves what you need. And then you have the choice to ignore that and then deal with the challenge of a body that's breaking down, a mind that's not orderly, and emotions that are out of control. That's up to you. Your job is to kind of build the house that you live in, okay? So let's keep going. Talmud Bavli says as follows, Hakol bidei Shemaim. That's right. Everything's in the hands of heaven except for the awe of God. That means that the only choice that ultimately you're going to make, we had this conversation about free will, the ultimate choice that you're going to make is whether or not you believe there's a God. If you believe, to the degree that you believe in God, will determine how you're able to respond to the realities that you're in. Think about it. You'll see in a minute. Tosfot, Baba Batra. Everything is in the hands of heaven except for chills and fevers. This means that things like lions and thieves and other bad occurrences are decrees from God. But chills and fevers are not decrees because one can avoid them. Certainly if someone wishes to kill himself by jumping into a fire or a river, he can, even though his death was not decreed. This is different than the concept of everything is in the hands of heaven except for the awe of heaven, because that refers to a person's attributes, whether he is strong or weak, poor or rich, tall or short, wise or dull, but this refers to events which occur to a person. There are certain things that you're born with. You're born with a certain level of intelligence, a certain level of mazalot. You're born with the gifts that you have. I can't control those things. It's not my fault I was born with a lot of charisma. What can I do? It was just a gift. What I do with that gift, can I use it to mislead people? Can I use it to manipulate people? Yes, I'm guilty of all those things. I'm not proud of it. However, I can also use those same talents for a lot of good things. Okay, that's up to you. You choose how you're going to use the things you have. God's not going to complain, why weren't you wealthy enough? Why weren't you smart enough? He doesn't care about that stuff. We know that Moses and Aaron are equals. How is that possible? How is it possible for Moses to have an equal if Moses was the greatest prophet that ever lived? How is he an equal to Aaron? And the answer is, do you guys know the answer?
Aaron was given the qualities that Moses had.
Yeah, go ahead, finish it. Finish it.
That Moses had, he would have given them better. That's an
Close, you're close. Let's refine that. What you're trying to say, Gila, is that each person is measured according to their own ability. And therefore, the reason why Moses and Aaron were equal is because we're not measuring Aaron to Moses. We're measuring Aaron to Aaron and Moses to Moses. And therefore, what makes them equal is that each one of them reach their full potential. And therefore, when Maimonides, Harambam says you can be as great as Moses, he doesn't mean you could be the prophet Moses. But you could be just as great as him by being the best version of yourselves. That's what it means to be great like Moses. Okay. Maimonides continues. He has one of his 13 principles of faith. This is principle number 11. I believe, ani ma'amin be'emunah shleima, that the Creator, blessed is His name, rewards with good those who observe His commandments and punish those who violate His commandments. That's 13 principles of faith. Now that's very harsh, Rabbi. I don't like that one. What do you mean He's going to punish those people that violate His commandments and reward those who observe His commandments? What does that mean? Now, I'm going to say it like this. I understand that all the commandments, we spoke about this a little bit in the morning. I understand that all the commandments are difficult, but I also understand that we make excuses to kind of like maintain our lifestyles, and we're too afraid of doing new things because we don't want to challenge our identities. We've bought into a script of what it means to be me, and I'm not interested in changing it for anyone, not even God. I'll do what He says when it's convenient and it makes sense to me, but when it doesn't, maybe I'll do that. Maybe later, maybe when I'm older, maybe when I'm wiser, but not right now. I'm not here to measure anyone's religiosity. No one can. You're probably all much more religious than I am, okay? Whatever religious means. But for me, ultimately, it's going to be about the effort you put into your development. I don't care which commandments you don't do. I don't care what you're struggling with. I don't care what you don't like. I'll tell you what I care about. And I have a suspicion this is what God cares about too. Not because it's me, but just because this makes the most sense to me. Is that ultimately God's going to measure us based on our desire to want to be more. When we are stagnant and we're stuck and we don't move forward, I suspect that's where most suffering begins. That's my own opinion. I'm not quoting sources. My opinion is that we suffer when we don't have clarity as to where it is that we want to go. We suffer when we are stuck in the same place, doing the same thing over and over again, not understanding how come things aren't changing for us. And that's insanity. To be someone who is alive, to be living, is someone who's constantly thinking about how to maximize every moment of time, every moment of their lives. Again, I say it 1% better today than I was yesterday. What are you doing today that's going to make you 1% better than the day before? Are you reading a little bit more? Are you slowing down a little bit more? Are you blowing the soup and smelling the flowers? Meditating? Are you spending time, just appreciating, feeling grateful for the things that you have, your spouses, family, children, whatever it is that you have? Are you, at the very least, doing something to make today a little bit better than it was yesterday? Because if you're not, it's hard for me to have sympathy. It's up to you. A kol bidei shemayim, chutz miyer shemayim. That's your choice. You could choose to be miserable. I can't make you happy if you want to be miserable. I can't give you advice if you don't want to take responsibility for yourselves.
Is what you're saying in contradiction to what Maimonides says?
No, not at all.
But it seems like he says it's actually about the results, not about. Doesn't seem like he's focusing on the desire, more he's focusing on the results. Or am I wrong?
No, you're right. That's the right way to read the Maimonides. He's talking about the results. The bottom line is, if you don't do X, Y will happen. He is saying that. Now, I will say that it's true, but remember, be mindful, it depends on where you're at, right? So, and that's why I'm saying that. Like, it depends on where you're at. So, is it true that, for example, if I wasn't Shomer Shabbat, right, is God going to zap me and punish me for not being Shomer Shabbat? The answer is, it depends. Where am I at? Am I even holding by Shabbat? If the answer is no, then no, he's not zapping me for not keeping Shabbat. He might be zapping me for not spending time trying to figure out Shabbat. He might be zapping me for whatever needs to come before Shabbat, but not for Shabbat. Do you know what I'm saying? Like if I'm not holding by Tefillah and Shabbat, certainly I'm not going to get zapped for girls. Do you know what I'm saying? Like it depends on where I'm holding. It depends on your reality. And therefore, your reality, your own spiritual mitziut, circumstance, will define where you are in the ladder of, reward and punishment. A guy who knows nothing, who's a complete ignoramus, who never learned anything about Judaism, decides one day to walk into a class, that person's reward is much greater than all the people here. Even though your reward is very, very great, not because you're coming to my class, because you're putting in the effort to go to a class. Right? That's amazing. But it depends on where you're coming from. A very religious, devout woman who's coming to a class, maybe she's not getting the same brownie points as someone who's less connected, but trying to put an effort to find connection. It depends on the person, depends where you're at. That's his point. Okay, let's look at next. Devarim. Hatsur Tamim, the rock, his works are perfect, all of his ways are just. A God of trustworthiness without iniquity, righteous and fair is he. This verse, Hatsur Tamim Pa'alo, ki kol drachav mishpat, kel emunah ve'en avel tzaddik v'yashar hu. This is a verse in the Torah that says that God is just. Mishpat, there's justice there. We don't believe in an evil God. He's not making you stub your toe in the morning. Well, that could be your fault, but he's not sending you a challenge in the morning because he just wants to see your reaction. Like the way we tease our siblings. It's not like that, right? It's a very different kind of reality. We're challenged because God is just. He's righteous. And therefore, everything that we go through in life is measured. It's measured. Talmud Bavli Brachot says as follows: La'olam yadam ragil omar kol da'avid rachmana latav avid. A person should accustom himself to say that everything that God does is what? It's good. Everything that happens is for the good. And the Gemara gives a story to express this idea. Gemara tells a story about Rabbi Kiva. He was once traveling from one place to another. When he reached a particular town, he looked for an inn which to dwell in, and he found none. And he declared, everything God does goes for the good, right? He went to sleep in an open area, accompanied by a bird, a rooster, a donkey, and a lantern. Sorry about the translation there. The wind blew and extinguished the lantern. A cat came and ate the rooster. A lion came and ate the donkey. Yet he said again, everything that God does is for the good. On that night, a group of bandits raided the town, took its inhabitants and captives. Rabbi Kiva said to his disciples, did I not tell you that all that God does is for the good? Right? And Rashi tells us that had the candle been burning, or had that rooster or donkey been alive, Rabbi Kiva would have been discovered and taken captive. So think of it like this. You're out camping, and you have your lantern, you have your tent, and you have your dog. And somehow all these three things are gone. And you're sitting there, God, why are you doing this to me in the middle of the night? It's not fair. I have no shelter, I have no light, I have no protection. You wake up in the morning and all the other camps are raided and they're all taken captive and you're okay. So in that moment in time, you're saying, I'm going through all the suffering. Why am I being punished? Everyone else has their tent. Everyone else has their source of heat. Everyone else has their protection. And I'm at all those things. Why? And then the next morning you wake up, I got it. Can I train myself to become an individual that says, you know what, I've subscribed to this idea, Ani ma'amin be'emunat shelema, I believe with complete faith that there is a God who is going to give me reward for all the things that I do, that he's a just God, and therefore the challenge that I find myself in right now is an expression of his benevolence, even though from my perspective right now, I can't fully comprehend it. You know what one of the most challenging things is to understanding suffering? It's called time. Time, right? In hindsight, everything is 20/20. I understand. I get it. Now I get it. It took me 20 years to understand why that happened. Now I get it. Okay, Ramchal, Derech Hashem, we're on the bottom of page 2, source number 10. He says, we know that in truth, God's only desire is to bestow good, and he loves his creation like a father loves his child. Let me read that again. We know that in truth, God only desires to bestow good, and he loves his creation like a father loves his child. However, the love itself can justify the father bringing suffering to his child for his ultimate benefit, as is written. As a father disciplines his child, so too does God discipline you. Therefore, divine judgment and law itself are based upon the flow from God's love. What does that mean? It's interesting that it speaks about the father's love and not the mother's love, right?
Let's go back to the sentence.
Go for it.
No, I'm not.
Oh. Divine judgment and law itself are based upon the flow, number 10. It's true, it is chesed, but it's more than that. A mother has a deeper mercy for her child, a deeper level of rachmanut than a father would. I'm much more likely to throw my kid into the river and watch him flail his arms trying to learn how to swim. His mom's not going to take that approach. Right? There's a certain level of edginess that some men have over their wives that make them different. There's a certain level of mercy that a mother has in her child that a father does not have. They love each other. A father loves a child, but a father can be sometimes a bit more stern because they want to push the kid to be a little bit bigger and better. Sometimes a mother is more soft. Not all mothers, of course. Some mothers are much more, fiery than the fathers, depending on the relationship, depending on the people, whatever it is. But for the most part, we say most dads have that edge in them that the mothers don't have. And therefore, talk about the father's love. So therefore, the things that we go through in life are all there because God loves you. We have to believe in that. We can't have a conversation about suffering if we don't believe that there's justice, there's reward and punishment, and that God loves us. It doesn't work. We can't have the conversation. Exodus, Shemot, right? And Moshe said, Hareni na kvodecha, show me your glory. We're on top of page 3. And God said, you are not able to see my face, for man cannot see my face and live. And God said, behold, there is a place before me, and I will stand you upon a rock. And it will be that when my glory passes over you, and I have placed you in a cleft in that rock, and will cover you with my hand, and you will see my back, my face you shall not see. Right? We've spoken about this here before. What does this mean? Moshe says, Harena kvodecha, show me your glory. Rashi tells us that he says, explain to me how tzaddik ve'ralo works? How does a righteous person suffer? Explain to me rasha ve'tolav. Explain to me why a wicked person prospers. How does that work? Show me, pnim, your face. Show me how you operate the world so I can understand it. What does God say? No man can see my face. Right? Ve'omer, lo tuchal lirot et panai ki lo yir'ani hadam v'chai. No man can see my face, because no man can see my face and live. No man can see my face and live. But then he says, don't worry about it. I got you covered. I'm going to put you on a rock. I'm going to pass by. When you see the back of my head, then you'll understand. What was the lesson he learned? What was God teaching him? Right?
Small doses.
Okay, yes, this is true. That yes, in small doses, but something more than just dosage. Ready?
You can't understand God's ways.
What's that?
You can't understand God's
True, but what was the bigger lesson, yeah?
You get to believe regardless of what you see or you don't.
No. That's very, very me. That's a din of you, but no, I appreciate that. No. It's a lot of justice. It's a very strong, statement, but no, it's something softer than that.
Well, to me, I don't know if this is what you're saying, but he actually has a face.
Yeah.
I was surprised to hear that.
Oh, so he has no face. It's allegorical, right? That's a good question. We know that God is anthropomorphic. He has no body parts. We're talking about it as far as an allegory. I want to understand the face. The word panim, face, could also mean pnim, the inner workings of something. And therefore Moses is asking, how does that work? How does the panim, the pnim, how does that work? How does it work inside? So God says, no one can see my face and live. He says, this is what I'll do. When you're seeing me right now, this is what we call real time. This is real time experience. When you see my head pass by, you know what happens? This moment is over. So therefore, Moses says, I want to understand how this works in real time. God says, you can't. Allow time to pass, let my head pass, and now you'll understand it. You want to understand how the system works? You can't understand it in real time. It won't work. The only way for you to understand this is for time to pass. Suffering can only be understood with a passage of time.
I didn't get that. I'm sorry.
God says, Moses says, I want to see your face. Explain to me how you work. God says, you can't understand it in real time. You want to understand how this works, suffering? Can't. You want to understand suffering? You need time to pass. Just like...
You realize in retrospect.
Correct.
Go back and understand why you did
You're saying you'll see me from behind, meaning and
Well, maybe we should ask
after.
Well, that comes in
What was the pretense to this? This is already Matan Torah. He's coming up and getting the luchot, the shniyot. He wants to bring it down. He's having this moment with God. He's like, explain to me how the punishment works. This is after the Egel. Perkei Avot. Let's keep going. Rabbi Yanai Omer. And bi'adenu lo mishavat harashaim. We could not understand the peace of the wicked and the suffering of the righteous. You just can't understand it. No matter how much we try to understand it, we can't understand it. But the individuals going through it, they might be able to understand it. I can't look at the suffering of somebody else and say, oh, I get that. You're not in a place to judge somebody else's suffering. Oh, they deserve that. They're going to get what's coming to them. We can't understand why people suffer, righteous or wicked. We're not in a place to judge other people's suffering. Rabbeinu Yonah, on this particular Mishnah, explains, he said, we know that in truth, there is an explanation for the matter, but we are not capable of comprehending it. Right? There's a difference. There's a limitation to my ability to understand the nature of things in the universe. Just like Hashem is saying to Moshe, we can't understand things in real time. God creates a much more complicated system, and we're limited in our ability to understand. He's infinite, we're finite. We are stuck. We can't fully comprehend things. And therefore, there is an explanation, but we're not necessarily privy to that information as well. Rambam, Mishnah Berachot, says as follows. The fundamental principle is that God rewards the righteous and punishes the evil. Everything is just. However, we are incapable of comprehending God's system of justice since we cannot understand the mind of God. The Torah teaches us that we are not capable of comprehending God's wisdom and the justice of His judgment in all that He does. This idea states just as the heavens are higher than the earth, so too are God's ways beyond your ways, and God's thoughts beyond your thoughts. We are limited. So as much as we think we understand, be mindful that we don't fully understand. We're only getting a glimpse, a small ta'am, a taste, a little bit maybe of trying to comprehend something, but don't ever feel that you fully understand something. The same idea, by the way, applies to mitzvot themselves. When you hear me giving an explanation for a mitzvah, or you hear any rabbi for that matter give an explanation of a mitzvah, be mindful, we call it ta'ameh ha-mitzvot. A ta'am means a taste. Why do we call it the explanation of the mitzvah? And the answer is because we don't have the explanation. Right? We have a small ta'am, a small flavor of the explanation. No one could tell you with certainty, this is why we do kosher, this is why we do Shabbat, this is why we do, Lashon Hara. We just do it because we're commanded to. We give ta'amim, we give small flavors, so we could try to go ahead and make it more palatable for ourselves, just like we eat. You don't need to have the flavors. In addition, we gave this small little tam to the mitzvot, so we appreciate it and we try to understand parts of it. Don't ever think for 1 second, God forbid, that the tam is the only reason. It's not. Same as over here. We don't fully understand these things, and all we're doing is giving a tam, a taste of understanding these things. Rabbi Yaakov Neiman, he wrote a book called Darchei Musar. He writes as follows, page 247, or at the bottom of page 3. He says, to believe that God created the heaven and the earth does not require great wisdom, since one's basic intellect directs one to have such a belief. Okay? However, the highest level of faith is to believe in God when one sees things that defy one's intelligence and cause one to ask difficult questions on the ways of God. Nevertheless, one dismisses these questions and has faith in God of the Jewish people and understands that it is impossible to comprehend the Creator. This is the highest level of belief. To believe that there is no injustice, Pasuk in Dvarim, even though according to one's perception one sees staggering injustice, as we have seen in our recent history with the murder of 6 million Jews. Those who were righteous, luminaries, pure boys, girls, men, women, entire cities and families were decimated without a remembrance. Regarding this, one needs to believe there is no injustice. For everything the merciful one does is for the good, and there is a heavenly calculation for everything. That was the top of page 4, where we just finished the 15th source. Right? And therefore, the highest form of faith is believing even when it's irrational. I can get you to believe in God. You find designer means what's it called? Means that there is there's a purpose, communication. I can get you there. I can help you understand and rationalize. Yeah, you made it. Rationalize, God. But when it comes to the challenge, do you believe in God when you're going through hardship? Do you believe in God when there is suffering? Do you believe in God when you can't understand why God is doing it to me? Or do you say, nah, this is not for me anymore? It's easy to believe in God when you're driving a fancy car, you could afford nice clothing, and you could go on fancy trips. That's easy. But when it gets difficult and I'm challenged, do I accept God then? Do I allow him to come into my heart then? Rabbi Yitzchak Kirzner, Making Sense of Suffering, source number 16. God in his essence is unknowable. Page number 4. God in his essence is unknowable, but that does not mean he does not exist. The totality of his ways is unfathomable, but that does not mean he has no ways. Intellectual endeavor remains crucial, but it must be coupled with another element: trust. Trust is what we are left with when we have gone as far as we can towards intellectual understanding and still have not obtained satisfactory answers. Trust is a certainty that there is a sense to God's ways even when we are denied access to those ways. God could have created us with the intellectual capacity to understand every mitzvah, including chukim, or he could have limited the Torah to only those mitzvot that we are capable of comprehending. But he did neither. Rather, he gave us chukim to introduce the element of trust into our relationship with him. We do not understand them. We observe them because we trust him. By the way, this is such a great metaphor for relationships. We often suffer in our relationships because we struggle in trusting our spouses. We struggle in surrendering a little bit and giving that trust to them because we're too afraid of letting go. But over here, he says that when we're talking about the challenge we go through, you got to have bitachon. You got to have trust. You got to have trust that things are going to be okay no matter what. Everything's going to work out. It's all going to be good. The Ramchal Derech Hashem, number 17, God's deeds incorporate an intrinsic quality of perfection and excellence into man's body and soul. Evil deeds, on the other hand, incorporate in him a quality of insensitivity and deficiency, all with precise measure depending on the deeds. God gave suffering the power to dispel the insensitivity in man, allowing him to become pure and clear. According to the Ramchal, what's the purpose of suffering? Marie, you're the best. That's right. She said it very clearly. She said, refining the soul. Okay, very good. Right? According to Ramchal, the purpose of suffering is to refine the soul. Okay, good. Let's see what Talmud Bavli says. How far, we're at number 18, how far does this idea of atonement achieved through suffering go? Rabbi Elazar said, even if someone bought a suit and it does not fit exactly, even if he wanted a cup of hot drink but was poured a cold or vice versa, even if someone accidentally puts his clothing on backwards, even if he reaches into his pocket for 3 coins but pulls out 2, that is suffering. Which means that God created a world where everything was supposed to line itself up perfectly for you. You see a poor person in the street and you want to put your hand in your pocket and pull out a nickel, and you pull out a quarter, that's suffering. You're supposed to go to a trip and you're watching your GPS and you miss the exit, that is a form of suffering. That's not the world God created. He created a world that was smooth and perfect. And therefore, when we find that outer resistance, be mindful it's a form of suffering. You want to open up your book to page 400 to chapter 17, and you get to chapter 12 or chapter 19, that is a form of suffering. You're not aware of it, but that's suffering, my friends. The world's not supposed to be that way. The world is supposed to be smooth. We call it glad. It's supposed to be glad. Smooth. Right? How far does it go? It goes pretty far. Let's look at number 19. Ramchal, Derech Hashem, page 97. Page 97, at the top of page 5. The good deeds of the wicked and evil deeds of the righteous, which constitute a minority, are dealt with in this world through its gratification and suffering. It is in this world the wicked are rewarded with prosperity and for the few virtues, while the righteous are punished for their few faults. Is that fair? That the wicked are able to have so much partying time in this world, and the righteous are punished for their few faults. Why is that the case? Is that fair?
They're not really happy.
What's that?
They're not really happy.
Who, the righteous? No,
Party animals.
the party animals are not. I agree with you. They're not really happy. They're the people that are perceived to be having those big parties and so on and so forth. They're not really happy. They're having fun. They're not happy.
Maybe that's what they need.
Yeah. Oh, they definitely need that challenge. They need the challenge. Everyone's challenge is unique. There's no question about it. But the question again is, how are you growing? It's so easy to lose yourself into a world of luxury and be so distracted by chasing comforts and fun and so on and so forth that you end up living 120 years of life without any real depth or meaning. Only to have regrets of all the things that you did and wishing you would have found that depth and meaning. At our core, we all want meaningful relationships. We want to leave a legacy behind. I have students who were in Iraq after 9/11. They volunteered for the army. They went to the Marines. They were the first soldiers on the ground in Iraq. Okay? And I've told some amazing stories that were like unbelievable, like stories where you literally see the hand of God saving their lives. And I said to them, what were you thinking of when you have bullets like flying, whizzing by your face? Like what thoughts go? What do you go through? Like what's the thought process? Like what are you thinking of? So he says this. He says there's two things that every soldier is thinking of when they're on the battlefield. Number one, if there's a God, please help me. Please save me. There's no atheist in a foxhole. Number two, I can't believe I have not left a legacy behind. Right? I want to have children. I want to leave something beyond myself. These are the most core, basic principles that every single person has at their core. That's what they want. They want to leave something beyond themselves in this world. Okay? And therefore, if you're involved in just the superficial, you'll never really find happiness. You want to understand why anxiety and frustration and depression are on the rise? Well, we have all the luxury in the world today, more than any other time in history. People should be happier today, shouldn't they? No, spoiler alert, when you have all those luxuries and you have all those distractions, you're not happier. You're less happy because those things don't bring us happiness. I'm not saying you shouldn't have nice things. Have nice things, live in a nice home, go on amazing vacations, wear fancy clothing, but not at the expense of losing out on finding depth and meaning. Don't subscribe to a life of superficiality. Don't run after counterfeit pleasures. Look for the real thing. And by the way, it's not only outside of ourselves, that's easy. What does the real thing look like when it comes to our inner selves? We often subscribe to superficiality when it comes to our inner world, our inner being. What are we doing to find depth and meaning within ourselves? Depth and meaning comes through challenge, my friends. It comes through the Olympian who wakes up at 4 o'clock in the morning and is doing push-ups and is swimming in the ice-cold water and is, doing that hard diet to get themselves in the hardest kind of shape. You are athletes, spiritual athletes. And a spiritual athlete needs to be on a special kind of spiritual diet. Meaning, depth, require effort. You want to shine like a diamond? Just be mindful that diamonds are made in the deepest parts of the earth, where they undergo millions of years of enormous amount of pressure. When a diamond on a rock is crushed long enough, it shines like the sun. It doesn't happen when it's easy, and it's very powerful. One of the strongest materials on earth, right? And I think that's what this source is saying over here. Deuteronomy, Dvarim, Biyadatam, Ki Hashem Elokecha Hu Elokim. Know, therefore, that the Lord your God, He is the faithful God who keeps His covenant and His loving kindness for those who love Him and keep His commands for 1,000 generations, but repays those who hate Him in His lifetime to destroy them. He will not delay with him. He who hates Him, He will repay him in His lifetime. Rashi, what does he mean? He's repaid during His lifetime in order to remove him from the world to come. Those people that are haters of God will have all the reward in this world, so that God can go ahead and remove him from an infinite reality. You want to go ahead and chase a finite reality? B'chavod. What? How does Rashi know that? Oh, is there a world to come?
Yes, but how do they know how it's decided?
All right, we don't know how it's decided. This pasuk, read the verse itself. What's he talking about? That's not. This is the Torah.
This is from the Torah.
Number 20 is the Torah. That's a Torah. Rashi is explaining the Torah, right? The pasuk makes it very clear that God's coming after those people who hate Him. Right? That's not like a rabbi's comment. This is God speaking through Moses. This is written 3,300 years ago. This is an old, ancient teaching.
Is it just people hate or don't believe?
I mean, we could have a much more in-depth class on just this verse. So what does it mean over here? But it makes it very clear. He says, "U'mishalem l'sonav." He pays back those who hate Him. Right? It's hard. It's harsh.
So it says specifically that He repays those who hate Him in His lifetime to destroy them?
Yes. To destroy them means in the world to come, not in this world. That's what he means. Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. Ramchal Derech Hashem, number 22. Every man's predicament in life is therefore his challenge. The highest wisdom divided these challenges among among the human race in a manner decreed fitting and proper to fulfill its profound plan. Every individual, therefore, has his own challenge in the battle with his yetzer, with his unique emotional, spiritual challenge. This is his assignment and responsibility in this world, and within its framework, he must strive for success. His deeds are then judged by God's attribute of justice with true precision, depending on the particular responsibility that was given to him. Each of us are given a unique set of challenges to help ourselves become greater human beings. The challenges that we have are our unique hurdles, the spiritual weights that we need to go through to overcome challenge. The story that I often tell, this will kind of like highlight, I think, this idea, is there's a man who was walking in the street, and he's standing at a corner waiting for the light to turn red, and a man comes up to him, pulls out a baseball bat, and starts beating him incessantly. Beating him with a bat, just non-stopping, just beating him, and the guy's unconscious. Okay, he wakes up, he has no idea where he is, and he sees he's in a hospital room, and he's in a complete body cast. Every single bone in his body is broken. He's suffering. Doesn't know why. Guess who walks in? The guy that broke, the guy with the bat walks in. He's like, he's like, you did this to me. You broke every bone in my body. I can't move. He says, no. He's like, I'm a doctor. He's like, what? He's like, yeah. He's like, I had to break every bone in your body to save you. You have this rare genetic disease that if I didn't break the bones in your body, it would have spread within 24 hours. You would have been dead. I just saved your life. Is the guy in the body cast suffering, now knowing that this guy saved his life?
No longer.
What's that?
No longer suffering.
He's no longer suffering. I would argue that one of the greatest reasons why we suffer is because we don't know why. And once we could figure out why we're suffering, the suffering goes away. And I think this is what the Ramchal is telling us. Like, you think that it's just suffering is like nonsense, like just nonsensical suffering. That doesn't exist. All the suffering is there for a reason. You need to wake up and figure out what that reason is. How are you responding to the suffering? How are you responding to the circumstance that you find yourself in? Did we say that earlier?
Embrace it.
We said that earlier. We read that. That was the teaching of Rabbi Kiva. That's what he said. That's exactly what we meant when we said that a person has an obligation. Go back if you want. Look on page 2. Look at source number 8. A person should accustom himself to say everything that God does is for the good. That's what we meant. That's what we mean. Right? Go back to the beginning part of this talk. That's exactly what we're saying. But Ramchal.
I think what I'm understanding is we're looking at something that is defined as a terrible suffering, anything, but instead of arguing with it in like why me, it's like look at that and say thank you Hashem for this opportunity to grow, and embrace it in a way that
Not only embrace it, but look for a reason to understand the why so you could grow from it. Look at the Ramchal number 23. A single soul can be reincarnated a number of times in different bodies. And in this manner, it can rectify the damage done in previous incarnations. Similarly, it can also achieve perfection that was not attained in its previous incarnation. The soul is then ultimately judged at the end of these incarnations. Its judgment will depend on everything that took place in all its incarnations, as well as its status as an individual in each one. When an individual has reincarnated soul, it is possible that he will be affected in a particular manner as a result of his deeds in previous incarnations. The situation in which he is placed may follow from this, and this situation may bring with it its special responsibility given to him. By the way, it's so ironic that he wrote this in his 20s because we know the way he died, and he believed he was a reincarnation, right? So he says that you want to understand suffering? Suffering sometimes comes from about that you have a spiritual mission that you have to complete. That's two opinions so far we gave. Number one, that all suffering happens for a reason. It's for your development and your growth. And number two is that suffering is an expression of a unique mission that your soul needs to fix in this incarnation of your life. And therefore the suffering that you may be going through may not be just to who you are, but may become a result of the past lives that you may have led and so on and so forth. And that's why you are going through the challenge that you find yourself in right now. And now how you respond to that circumstance will give you the challenge, reward necessary to become a bigger, greater expression of the soul.
That could be a result of reincarnation?
Yes, that's what we're saying. That the suffering that we go through in life can be an expression of a reincarnation, misdeeds in our past. That we can't fully understand that right now. That's because you're not aware of all the things you did before. You think you were good this whole time, but for 1,000 years you were a really bad girl. Right? Okay, so let's keep going. Talmud Bavli. I want to finish these sheets, otherwise we're going to be here. I have 10 minutes. Okay, Talmud Bavli. Talmud Bavli says as follows. We're on the top of page 6. I'll send you the sheets later, Marie.
24?
Yeah, number 24. Talmud Bavli Brachot. Rava, and some say Rav Chizda, stated, if a person sees that the circumstances of suffering have befallen him, he should examine his deeds. As it is stated, let us search our ways and introspect and come close to God. That is from Eicha, from the book of Lamentations. Gemara says clearly, straight out, you're going through challenge, you're suffering, look at your actions, look at your deeds. What have you done? Are you doing everything you should be doing? Are you doing it the right way? Are you greeting people? Are you caring for people? Are you giving charity properly? Are you being mindful? Are you showing gratitude? Look at yourself before you start crying about the suffering you're going through. Use the challenge to re-examine the circumstances that you find yourself in. Perkei Avot. Avraham Avinu was challenged by 10 tests and overcame all of them. This teaches us how great was Avraham Avinu's love for God. That's what God wants to do. He wants to challenge Avraham to see how much he loved him. Look how Rabbi Vajra Bartanura explains it. The first 10 tests of Avraham Avinu was in Ur Kasdim, when Nimrod threw Avraham into a furnace. The second was having to leave his home and his country. The third was the famine. The fourth was when Sarah was taken by Paro. The fifth was the war of the 4 kings. And the sixth was the covenant between the parts. And Avraham was shown the exiles of the Jewish people undergo. The 7th was the circumcision. The 8th was when Sarah was taken to Abimelech. The 9th was the banishment of Hagar. And the 10th was the sacrifice of Yitzchak. God wanted him to go through all of that to challenge Avraham to give him reward. For what? Ramban, the matter of a test is based on a person's complete freedom of choice. For it is up to each person to decide whether or not he wants to do a certain action. God tests the person in order to bring potential into the realm of action. All of the tests in the Torah are for the benefit of the one being challenged. Right? It's not just because God wants Abraham to show, I love you, God. I'm going to be committed to you no matter what. He doesn't care. He doesn't need that. The refinement over there is like the coach yelling at the kid, do another 50 push-ups. It's painful. I want to stop, coach. No, give me another 10. Give me all that you got. The pressure, the suffering, the challenge that God created for Abraham is what allowed Abraham to be Avraham Avinu, our forefather. Perkei Avot, Rabbi Yaakov said, Ha'olam hazeh domeh leprusdor b'fnei ha'olam haba. This world is like a corridor to the world to come. Hatken atzmecha beprosdor. Prepare yourself in the corridor in order to enter the palace. This world is a training ground for a spiritual reality we can't begin to comprehend. Rambam, Hilchot Teshuvah. We have a few more sources, and I want to speak for a couple minutes and just bring it all to a conclusion. The goodness that awaits the righteous in the world to come. This is life, which has no death. What is the world of Olam? What is the world to come? This is life which has no death, and goodness which has no element of bad. This is the meaning of the verse, in order that you will be good and that you will have lengthy days. We learn from the tradition, it will be good for you in the world which is all good, and you'll have lengthy days in a world which has no end. This is the world to come. The reward of the righteous is to merit up this pleasantness and to be part of this goodness. The punishment of the wicked is they will not merit this life, but will be destroyed and die. All things come to an end. However, those that live a righteous life are able to enter into a newer reality, an infinite reality. Perkei Avot, he was hu haya omer, yafeh sha'achat beteshuvah u'masim tovim ba'olam hazeh. 1 hour of teshuvah and good deeds in this world is worth more than the entire world to come. And 1 hour of spiritual bliss in the world to come is better than the whole life of this world. We believe that it's in this world. This is so anti anything that you'll read in Muslim and Christian literature. This is the exact opposite of whatever. Everyone says the whole purpose of life is the afterlife. This Mishnah is saying the opposite. That the most meaningful things you could do in the existence of our reality, physical world, spiritual world, is in this world. What's the question? We just learned the opposite, right? We're saying over here in this Mishnah, this particular Mishnah, Perkei Avot, is saying that 1 moment of life in this world is greater than a whole entire spiritual reality. But we were just talking earlier about how the goal is to get this thing called world to come, and therefore the suffering, the challenge is all about getting to this place, this place of awesomeness. This sounds like it's contradicting one another. And the answer is it's not. Because everything that we go through in life about our development, our free will, our choice, can only be expressed in this world. In a world of spirituality, nothing moves. Nothing changes. It's all the same. However, you want to understand where your choices matter, where you could express your identity, where the actions that you do actually have the effect of changing something that is infinite. It's in this reality and only in this reality.
Basically, I think that's what they mean, like, why have this world at all? But we're here to earn the world to come.
Correct. But again, listen to what the focus. True. In Christian and Muslim literature, okay, it's all about Olam Haba. We're not saying that. Yes, there's something called Olam Haba, but the real Ikar parts of this life is here. There's no Jew that could ever become a suicide bomber. There's no Jew that removes himself from all physical things and just devotes himself to spirituality and God. A Jew's job is to immerse himself in the world of the physical and use every part of his life to elevate his reality into something more. I'm going to refine myself in the circumstances that I find myself. I'm not going to allow my circumstances to define me. I'm going to define my circumstances. Who's in control? Are you in control, or the reality is in control? This is just the way it is, Rabbi. It's nonsense. You surrender, you give up, that's because you've surrendered and you've given up. And I don't accept that. We say that, no, wake up. This world is the world of action. It's this world where your choices matter. It's such an empowering idea. You're so locked up in your head about the suffering and the pain that I'm going through, and you're being blinded by the fact that your superpower is the power of pulling yourself out of that reality. What's the greatest stumbling block? The greatest challenge, you know what that is? You, and you, and you, and you, and you, and you, and you. Me. I'm the greatest stumbling block. I'm the greatest stumbling block in my life. I'm the greatest threat to me achieving greatness. I'm the reason why I go through my suffering. I don't either spend enough time refining myself, I don't spend enough time understanding myself, I don't spend enough time understanding the circumstances that I'm in. I'm the challenge that I need to overcome. Shemot Rabbah, the last source of it happened that when Rabbi Avahu left this world, he was despondent, thinking that his accomplishments were limited. Then when he saw all the good things that were prepared for him in the world to come, he began to feel happy and said, all these things are for Avahu, which means that ultimately there is this amazing place of delight for every single one of us waiting for us. Now, what does this all mean? So let's just review. Number one, there's a God. He's infinite, and he loves you infinitely. He's just, and therefore we don't believe in injustice. Can we understand suffering? No. Do I need to trust in God when it's challenging, that everything will be okay? Yes. Everything happens for the good. Gam zu le tova. Everything happens for the good. Get used to saying that. Let that become your mantra. Gam Zlotova, Gam Zlotova. Miss a spot, Gam Zlotova. Miss a train, Gam Zlotova. Everything is for the good somehow. Do I fully understand it? No. I'm going through challenge? Okay. I'm going through challenge. Somehow this has got to be for my benefit. Am I refining myself? Is it something that I can't understand? Maybe it's coming from a different reality. How am I responding to the suffering will determine whether or not the suffering itself will be actual suffering or the spiritual weights necessary to grow. Why do we do this? Because God wants to refine us. He wants to give you excellence like the coach. And He's also preparing you for an infinite reality. He's preparing you for an infinite reality. An infinite reality is given to those people that earned it. How do we earn it? By making the right choices, by wanting to grow, by wanting to be good, by choosing to do good things, by asking good questions, by thinking, by examining. We do those things, and suffering becomes something that's in the past.
You almost think that there is a logic here.
Yeah, there is.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's all interconnected. There's 100%. That's why the sheet is prepared in that way. It's meant to help draw you in that way. I was taking you through a journey. This is how I think. Okay, so I hope that you were able to appreciate it a little bit. I call this class Towards Understanding. It's not the understanding of suffering, and I'm confident that you'll walk away with it, review this, and internalize it, and you'll find that suffering becomes a powerful tool to help you achieve your greatness. May you be blessed with clarity, understanding, peace, and happiness. Have an amazing, amazing day. Thank you so much for listening. Marie.